Hi everyone, so this is day 14, urban and rural problems. So we will see what are the problems related with the urban and rural settings and the explanations about the urban problems, such as the urbanization in the US history, and we will see the solutions or the possible efforts for the urban and rural problems. There are many issues of the urban and rural problems. So these are deeply related with the social issues we covered in the previous chapters. So there are some crime issues and the poverty issues and residential segregation issues. So we will cover that in the related issues in here. We will see what are sociological theories addressing the urban and rural life and see what are the backgrounds of the urbanization in the US and the related problems and the positive and negative aspects of the rural life and the possible solutions related with the urban and rural life. So urbanization in the US. In the US history, urbanization has been processed in the whole history. Urbanization is the population shift from the rural areas or less populated area to the large cities in the populated area. In the colonial period or the 19th century or 18th century, there were like two main sources of the population influx from the rural area to the large city area. There were waves of the immigration from the island, Italy, or other countries. In these days, there are like worldwide immigrations toward the U.S., but at the time, there were very limited chances for the immigrations. Anyway, there was one source of the urbanization in 19th century, and there was also industrialization causing moves to work. So the rural compared with the rural area, urban area had higher chances of the opportunities of the jobs and education, and for other better housings and technologies. So they wanted to work and live around the factories or the corporations. So there were the attractions of moving toward to the large cities instead of living the rural area. There was like lack of the sanitation and the hygiene issues in the urban cities. So it was the cause of the latent disease or high death rates, as the cholera, typhoid, and other illnesses in the city area. The problems in the early urban cities had very similar with the problems in the U.S. of the cities. There were high crime rate called as mass violence of the native-born whites toward the ethnic minorities, usually the Catholics and the new immigrants. Before the Civil War, huge cities were just centered on the East Coast area, but after the war, with the gold rush or other historical changes, people moved to the West Coast and the South. So about 75% of the whole US population in the urban area, which are some like counties or cities, more than 2,500 people. If you live in the area or the county or town under like 2,500 residents, you are living in the rural area. But I think many of us are living in the urban area. This is the trend of the urbanization. On the left-hand side, you can see the increasing trend of the New York, the Chicago. Chicago is decreasing a little bit, but Los Angeles is also increasing a lot. You can see those three major cities of the U.S. has slightly declining, but anyway, in the general, it's increasing. So the urbanization in the United States is a percentage living in urban area. As I mentioned before, we had about more than 75% of the urban population in the whole US. So you can see it's a little bit like a sweat down, leg down, but you can see the very steep incline or a steep increasing pattern of the percentage of the people living in the urban area. There are sociological theories. Functionalism thinks about the positive points or the negative points of the urbanization, such as what are the positive or advantages of the living in the urban area or the urbanization, or what are some negative points or dysfunctions of living in the urban area or urbanization. This is not a simple or easy question because there are both pros and cons, which are benefits and disadvantages trade off each other. So we can see just cities are very impersonal and alienating for their residents, but as well as there are some possible bonds or communities or social networks. So it's very hard to say cities are just impersonal or alienating the people, or just full of the bonds or the communities help us. So Sense of Community by the Ferdinand Tönnies. He termed very two famous terms, Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft. Gemeinschaft means traditional societies with the better bonds or the better network, like the family, kin, and the community. So people care and help each other in the format of the Gemeinschaft. In contrast, Gesellschaft in the very weak tie in the urban setting. So in the cities or the industrialization cities and urbanization, the social ties are very weak because they live in the even though they live in the very populated area, they don't have the close family or kins and community compared with the Gemeinschaft community. So in the city area, they have the lower or weaker ties compared with the Gemeinschaft society. It's kind of losing the social bonds or sense of the community, or like a belonging social identity of the community, stability, and increasing the concern of the rootlessness. Let's suppose that you are moving, or you are going to abroad to study. So you are the only one who live in there. So you are leaving your family and your friends or your hometown temporarily. So if you go there without some like a close friends or a social network and other social identities, so maybe you will be feeling about the losing the social ties at the Gesellschaft. And if you just come back to your country again, to your town and your school and your community again, then you can feel more traditional feelings of the strong ties in the family and kin community. So in this example, we are just thinking about our like a personal movement based on our needs. But in that case, on the urbanization process, they had to move to the urban area to work or to support their family. So they have to leave their community for their economic purposes and other essential purposes. So after moving to the urban area, they lost their bonds and the social network to stabilize their life. So this is kind of a negative view of the urbanization in terms of the bond and the sense of the community. So compared with the Tönnies' examination, Emil Durkheim, who is like a very big giant of the sociology, he insisted like organic solidarity, which is more positive view toward the urbanization. So this is in the traditional view or traditional towns or cities, they had a mechanical solidarity. The social bond and community feeling were strong in the mechanical solidarity. However, in organic solidarity, social ties still exist even though they live in the larger and the urban cities. So in the urban cities, especially for the industrialized factories or other things, we cannot create a product for our own. So if we live in like a small town in the middle age or sometime, we could create our chair by ourselves, or we can just trade some small goods in the very small town market. However, in the recent days, the products are more complex and more advanced, so we cannot create our own TVs or electronic goods, other things. So we should depend upon individuals. We should weigh on, or we should rely on each other. So in the factory, some people should press the button of the factory, and some people need to hammer something, or somebody need to use the nails or use the hand to combine the products. So he called that this kind of situation is a division of labor. Everyone has to depend on everyone else. So we are living in the area, increasing the solidarity or the ties. In the contemporary, relatively contemporary functional theories, they also record some strong bonds still exist in the neighborhood community. So, because your community, maybe if you're living in the dormitory, it's kind of community you can live. So, if you have some other extracurricular activities, this is a kind of new activities in the community. Cities generate more creativity and greater tolerance for new ways of thinking. So comparing with the people or younger generation living in the living in the urban area, they are considered or they have some images of the more advanced or innovative. So they are more open to the new ideas or new technologies. However, the rural residents are less likely to accept those new findings or new traditions. So study found it's true that you can see in this graph. You can see the tolerance level for the premarital sex is higher in here. So the metropolitan area residents has a lower rate of the lower rate of the saying it's always wrong about the premarital status or premarital sex. So the rural area residents are more likely to think the premarital sex is always wrong. Conflict theory is, so in the functionalism theory, it had a mixed view, both positive and negative views about the urbanization and the cities. However, conflict theory is uniformly very critical to the urbanization and the cities. They emphasize on the conflicts between the like a higher class as the haves and the lower class have nots, or elites or poor people of color. If we imagine about the metropolitan city, such as DC or New York, the Manhattan, Chicago, or Los Angeles, you can see a luxurious apartment or the luxurious housing area with the high-rise corporation buildings, versus the poor lives in the disadvantaged housings, such as like a very deprived area around the DC. So you can see even the especially in the Chicago or some other more segregated area, you can see those two areas are divided by one street. So if you cross the street, you can move from the luxurious building to the poor neighborhood or poor community. You can see there are many cultural conflicts in the conflict theory. So there are some crimes by immigrants often result from the discrepancies or clashes between their traditional ways of thinking and the norms of American society. So if you think about the honor killing, like killing some other people or killing the family member to keep or to maintain their honor. So if their daughter, some people of culture have some like a tendency of the honor killing, that if their family member decrease or lose the honor or for themselves or on their family, they even kill on their family, or even they kill the people who cause the kind of the reduction of the fame or honor. So in their country or in their culture, it was very legitimated and it was very reasonable. But if they just keep the cultural norm in this country, this is kind of considered as a crime. So this is the cultural conflict explained by the conflict theory. They say that political economy is very prevalent in the city area. The political and the economic elites are the upper class in the city, and they interact each other to maximize their benefits and their interests. Urban development often accompanies the displacement of poor urban residents. So we call gentrification is so like a development of the highly developed area or the urban area. So the residents of that area cannot afford the rent fee because there are like a new buildings and new luxurious apartment placed because of the development plans. So they move to the like a poor area. So development of the Harlem Street of the New York City was very useful and very effective to increase the general level of the quality of the city area in the Manhattan, in the Harlem area. But because of the increased rent fee and the service fees or the other costs, the original residents in the Harlem area was removed and forced to move to the poorer or the more less decent area because of their affordable level. So this is kind of city setting for the wealthier class members' economic enhancement or wealth or power growth. So this is also called like growth machine ideology by the scholars. That city is just like a settings or place for the wealthier or richer or powerful people to develop or to grow their impact or their power. The symbolic internationalism is talking about the interaction between or among the people in the city and the perception of the various aspects of life. So they usually think about the lives of the poor and the people of color because these are they have some like unique patterns of the living style or lifestyle. Cities depicted as the places where various norms and values prevail, so there are many chances to interact their different norms and the values. So there can be some the quarrels or conflicts, but there is also the possibility to interact each other, increase their understanding level or acceptance level, because there are more chances to interact each other. Then the higher frequency of the interactions may increase their acceptance level and understanding level of the other classes and the races, and partly help overcome the racial tensions or the class tensions. There are several types of the urban residents. They're like cosmopolites, and they are living in the urban area because they are attracted to the settings of urban area. And the unmarried and childless individuals and couples because they love the area and there are very many facilities and social infrastructure, so they are living in the urban area. And ethnic villagers who are the new immigrants, moved from their country or their community to settle down in the urban area. So they have some strong bonds compared in the sense of community compared with other people. And there are two types of the people who don't have some strong bonds in the sense of community. These are deprived, who are poor and trapped, and also the who are poor cannot move out of the town or that residential area because they cannot afford for the rent prices of the other places. So they're just too poor to move to other places. So they don't wanna live there. So they have some like a lower or weaker bond and sense of community. So we can see socioeconomic background's impact on the city, so styles of the life or the conditions of life in the urban area, and that experience is positive or negative. So for the cosmopolites and unmarried childless individuals and couples and the ethnic villagers, the life in the city can be very positive in general. However, for the deprived or trapped, the living life or the living experience would be very negative because they don't want to live there voluntarily. So there are many problems of the social life in the urban area. The fiscal problem is the economical problem or the financial problem. The city of the like large cities has the huge amount of population. So if they are in the like recession period, if they lack of money, they cannot support the poor or the people in needs, such as disabled people or aged people or minority members. Some cities, such as Detroit, experience serious budget issues, even facing the endangered public safeties. So if they lack of the governmental fund or the budgets for the hygiene or sanitation or even the supply of water or electricity, they lose this type of the social infrastructure, which will be very critical for the life quality of the people in the city. And they require some for example, for the cities of the fiscal problems or financial problems, they require to have some low interest loans for the local infrastructure, such as installing the rails or public transportation or education. And funding for the housing and the training for the low-income residents would be very essential for the poor cities. It also makes life worse for the marginalized social class people because they don't have some resources and they usually need to depend on the governmental funding or the aid. If the government lack of some budget or money for them, they will be more deprived compared with the upper class people in that area. Crowding is also the main source of the social problems in the urban area. The residential crowding is just simply that, meaning that large number of people are living in the small area. So population density can be measuring the residential crowding level as number of people living in per 1 square mile. Household crowding is also the similar issue. The relatively small size of dwelling units. So in the small area, there are too many houses or too many people living in that area. So it means that they live in the very, very tiny and small spaces if they don't have enough money to rent some like a decent or the large room units. These are very related with the high level of stress, depression, aggression, and the crime because they interact with the incidents or they have like higher chances of insulting each other. The housing is the standard of quality of housing in the urban areas, and you can imagine that the housing level can be differed by the social class and the budget you can have. So there are some issues of the high price problem because it's too costly. So if you live in this area for the to attend the schools in the Europe, Maryland, or Georgetown, or George Washington, it's too pricey in the city for the city residents. Also, there is like a racial segregation and the residential segregation issue. Even though federal law prohibits segregated housing, still we have the high level of segregation in the urban city area. If white flee to the suburb because they can have some enough money to buy a new house or a good house in the suburb, then the people of color or people of the lower class would left behind in the poor area in the urban settings. Then they will have some like a low tax level compared with the rich whites. Then the government or local government or community will suffer from lacking of the money for them. So living in the segregated area is very, very disadvantageous because not just because they are poor, but there are low future mobility options by the higher quality of the education or some like a lack of the job opportunities and social network to help them to find the jobs or educational opportunities or quality. The homelessness is the big issue of the urban area. People live in the streets or abandoned area, cheap motels, or living in some LMS's home temporarily. These are the homelessness. So this is a very wide concept, not just limiting the people on the street, but the people on temporarily living in the else's home. So it's kind of life-threatening for those people. So especially for the people who live in the street, in the harsh climate, such as the hot climates and very hot weather in the Chicago several years ago, many homeless people or large amount of people died because of the weather, and then they could be the target of the crimes easily. And there are too few shelters that exist to meet the demands in the city area usually, and it can be also understood the issue of the poverty. So in the textbook it said that it cannot be understood as the issue of poverty, but I think that's a typo. So homelessness can be understood by the poverty issue. So for example, if the wealthier class family just lose their home by the fire or by the accident, they can move to another home relatively easily, because they have enough money, or they may have some, like a good insurance, like the home insurance, then pay for their housing rent or other things. However, for the poor people, if they lose their job or if they have some like incidents or like a fire or something, they cannot have enough money to rent a new house. So they should be live in the street or live in the cheap motel like that. So they are more likely to be homeless. So it's very striking that about 14% of Americans have been experienced of the homelessness at least one point of the time. So this is kind of severe level of the health condition problems and others. So it's very striking that because 14% is higher than expected. So the traffic and transportation. This is very inevitable issue because there are so many people in the small area. The traffic and transportation should be jammed or congested. So this is kind of inevitable issue in the urban area. We call the traffic gridlock as the traffic in all directions, barely moving or not moving at all. So if we drive through the DC area in the poor timing, just you maybe stay in on the street 2 hours or 3 hours just in the 2 or 3 blocks. So this is kind of wasting of gas and energy and time. So this is like losing all the negative points in the urban city. If we have the better public transportation, such as the better subway system or better bus transportation system network, maybe it could resolve some part of this issue. So also the traffic jam on the transportation issues increase the stress level, even compared with like a pilot in the battle in the war or something. The air pollution is very unconventional issue. High density of population and the factories and traffic jam result in the air population, result in on the health problems, in the lung cancer or the lung problems and other things, and higher proportion of the urban residents of people of color. So we also mentioned that the wealthier people move out from the urban area to the suburb, and the people of color or the lower social class may live in the urban area more likely, and then they are more vulnerable to the air pollution level. So it could account for the inequality of the health partly. So it's very serious for the infants and children. So if we have the infant or children, you may consider to move to the suburb area because of the air pollution level. The crime is very inevitable as well. There are higher crime rate per 100,000 people compared with that rate of the rural area. So we cannot just say that the crime rate is higher because there are more people. Because the rate is calculated per 100,000, so it's comparing how many number of the accidents or how many number of the crimes per 100,000 people in the urban city on the crime or the rural city. So we should not say that because there are more people in the urban area, the crime rate is higher. But anyway, poverty also may not fully explain about the higher crime rate of the urban area because the general poverty level is higher in the rural area. So it can be possibly residential housing crowding may account for the higher rate of the crime in the urban area. Higher population density. So this is crowding level. So there are more potential targets in the small area, in the urban area. So in the rural area, people are very widely spread and there are less number of the potential targets. So in the large area. There are also more frequent interactions, possibly insulting each other. If you drive through this area in the very traffic jam and very the congestion area, and maybe you are more likely to be angry about the very bad driving, and you may shout to each other, and there are like a higher chance of the fights or even the crimes or violences. Also, crowded housing also is a high stress level, because the shortage of the housing or the low quality of the housing may increase the high stress, and then associated with the higher chances of the fighting or the insulting each other. We call the deviant place as the neighborhood with the higher crowding rates and the crime rates, and cities are inevitably more vulnerable to the number of crime because there are more people living in the small area. So rural life is also partly is very beneficial because they can enjoy the life in the nature and less crime or less issues of the stress. But lack of sufficient numbers of the qualified, skilled people, or especially for the medical professionals, account for the rural health problems because they have higher chances of the the higher chance of the being ill or having the disease. Long distance of the patient need to travel to go to the hospital or to get the treatment is also the problem of the rural health. And they are some like insufficient level of treatments by the medical professionals, and because there are lower number of the providers and there are a lower quality of the medical professionals there. And also there are more aged people in the rural area, so you can see these type of the conditions account for the poorer health level of the rural area. Education in the rural area. The decline in school enrollment and the higher level of school closings is like the stoppers or burdens for the students. So there are longer community distance for the rural students and like a lower funding level, and the challenges of the hiring good quality of teachers in the rural area contribute the problems in the education in the rural area. And also the poverty level is higher because of the out-migration of the young, good skilled workers, and lack of the advanced jobs and limited chance of jobs contribute to rural poverty. So because of lack of the social infrastructure, we may need to improve their life quality with the better social infrastructure. And also there are more domestic violence because even though they have some like a lower level of the crime rate, there are some like a large danger or the large risk of the being a victim of the domestic violence, usually women. It's very hard to find someone to get help, and even the police can be very enlightened or uneducated to know about the domestic violence, and even they know each other well, so they know the abuser very well, so they will be very tolerant to the domestic violence about the abuser. And also there are a lack of shelters of organizations help the victims. So there are many efforts to improving urban and rural life. So providing the good affordable housing for the city residents to reduce the level of the crowding housing, and reduce the level of resident segregation and build some sufficient level of the public transportation will reduce the level of stress of the urban residents. And also placing more public care and social legal services and the infrastructure in the rural area would be very helpful as well. Okay, so the due is Sunday night, so you make sure to submit all of your assignments and check your survey. So I know many of you already participated in the survey, but if you didn't participate the survey, please do that as soon as possible. So it's due on this night, it's midnight today. If you don't participate there, you will lose the extra points in here. And also if we have the 50F50, I will just keep the current syllabus. However, otherwise, if I have like a result like a 55 or 45, I will make the change based on the result. Okay, thank you for your time and have a great Sunday.